Disney has always had a reputation for having villains in their movies that end up being more popular and beloved than their heroes are, at least until the turn of the century, that is. But the point is, as I already explained at great length in another video, which you can find a link in the description to, everybody loves a good Disney villain, especially when they're as diabolically evil as they come. But if one had to give perhaps the most extreme example of a villain completely overshadowing and eclipsing the hero in one of their movies, it may just be Hades in Hercules. Because let's face it, when this movie is brought up, Hades is the first, and for some people, only character that they think of. He easily owns the entire film and is pretty much its lasting legacy in a nutshell. But that being said, why is that the case? How does Hades manage to steal the film from everybody else to an even greater extent than is usual for a Disney villain? And today, I'd like to try and answer those questions to the best of my ability. And there will be spoilers ahead, so in case you've never seen Disney's Hercules but plan to, you might not want to proceed any further. You have been warned. Okay, so there are honestly several reasons as to why Hades is the standout character in Hercules and the one most people remember, but perhaps the most obvious is that he's simply a ton of fun to watch, because in a movie that doesn't really have too many fun characters apart from Phil, Hades stands out as very comedic, and that, combined with his equally comical and dim-witted henchmen that he plays off of very well, makes him the source of many of the film's most hilarious moments. Seriously, there's a reason that Hades is easily considered one of the funniest villains in Disney history, because apart from the likes of Yzma, nobody comes even remotely close to being both hilarious and evil all at once. Though somewhat impressively, despite the fact that he's such a funny villain, he also manages to be a surprisingly effective and competent threat all the same, because his motivation is also a very well done one, as he hates his designated role as the Lord of the Dead and wants to rule Mount Olympus instead, as well as get revenge on Zeus for making him the ruler of the underworld in the first place. And though that is rather simple, it's understandable enough that the audience can buy his determination for his plan not to fail no matter what, because one has to admit that spending an eternity working a job you hate, all the while getting the king of the gods on your bad side for nothing, is a pretty unappealing prospect. But as I noted before, he does not mess around when it comes to achieving his goals, as he's willing to kill a baby, and his own nephew on top of that, to ensure victory, shows no care for any of the dead he has to look after, and is not above making very cruel deals with people in order to get what he wants. To put it simply, Hades may be a very funny character, but he is still pure evil all the same, and not to mention extremely selfish, with his lack of morals and determination to achieve his goals no matter what, making for a very deadly combination. But in addition to that, he's also very charismatic, which helps hide his unpleasant nature very well, because whether he's putting on a used car salesman act or throwing a tantrum, he's entertaining the audience through it all, which is something that the more heroic characters aren't really able to do. But just for one particular example of this, take a look at the scene where Hades makes his bargain with Hercules to give up his strength, because Hades may be his usual funny self, but he also comes across as extremely threatening all throughout, as if all of the cards are already stacked in his favor and he is not afraid to use them against him, and as a result the stakes feel very real. And on top of that, he also uses his charisma to make up for the fact that Hercules sees right through him and is able to con his way into getting him to accept his bargain, showing just how intelligent and manipulative he can really be when the chips are down. To put it simply, Hades is honestly everything anybody could ever ask for in a great villain. He's got a good and understandable motivation, is pure evil and willing to do whatever it takes to get what he wants, very intelligent, has funny sidekicks, is an undeniable threat to the other characters, very charismatic, and above all, extremely entertaining for the viewer to watch. Really, what could anybody ask for in such a villain, especially in a comedy movie? Though honestly, a lot of the credit for this also belongs to James Woods' performance, because originally Hades was written as a very scary and serious character, but after Woods auditioned with the idea of him being a very chill used car salesman type, the writers loved it so much that they completely rewrote the character into what we know today, which was definitely the right call, because not only does Woods nail the character, but one can tell that he is having a ton of fun in voicing him, which only makes him even more enjoyable. And indeed, not only has Woods repeatedly said that Hades is hands down his favorite role, but he has reprised the role on every occasion that the character has been required to speak, no matter how small the part. And considering how consistently entertaining the results have been, it's obvious that his casting is a major reason why the character works. As I noted in another video, which you can also find a link in the description to, certain people are just born to play certain parts, and James Woods as Hades is most definitely one of those cases. Though all that being said, because of just how fun and well done Hades is, many often miss that the movie does do a surprisingly good job with most of its characters, and Meg is often a go-to example of this when referring to characters besides Hades, as she's pretty much the exact opposite of most Disney female leads in that she's both very cynical, as well as refuses to fall in love due to a past experience that left her as nothing but a slave to the Lord of the Dead. And yet, she ends up changing for the better anyway, and is willing to give up everything for the man that saw the best in her and would never do anything to hurt her, making for a very well done character overall. And there's even Phil, who's been left embittered by constantly mentoring people who fail him, which might make one call his credentials into question, but considering he comes recommended by Zeus himself, we'll just take his word for it. The point is, he only agrees to mentor Hercules at first in order to finally train a true hero, and isn't all that happy about it, but eventually comes to care about him as a person to the point that he risks his life to inspire him, and in the end gets what he always wanted anyway, making him a much happier and better person by the end. Though one of the more overlooked characters that this movie does a surprisingly good job with is actually Hercules himself, because while often dismissed as just another example of how boring Disney princes tend to be, even though that isn't really true, as I explained in another video which you can also find a link in the description to, in actuality, Hercules is a pretty well done character, if only for just how plain virtuous he is. I mean, he's been bullied and labeled a freak all of his life, feels like he doesn't belong anywhere, but he never takes it out on anybody. The only times he ever gets angry is when he's told Meg betrayed him and when she's in danger, and both are more than justified. Otherwise, he is literally the nicest person you could ever meet, as all he wants to do is prove his worth, and is willing to do any good deed, put in all the hard work he has to, in order to achieve that. Even when he does become the most popular and beloved hero in all of Greece, he never lets the fame go to his head. Instead, he does exactly what he said he would do: prove his worth and make everybody in his life happy, up to and including his adopted parents. Even in the scene where he's telling Zeus that he's an action figure, there's no arrogance, no entitlement in his voice, just very justified pride in what he was able to accomplish. To put it simply, Hercules may just be one of the most noble and pure heroes Disney has ever created, and had Hades not stolen the film from him, he might have gotten more recognition as a great role model for young men, as there is almost nothing about him not to admire. Pretty much the only reason it took him so long to become a god was because the thought of godhood was always in the back of his mind until he saved Meg, but one can't help but get the feeling that he would have become a god much sooner had he not known that being a hero would make him one, as he probably would have done most of the heroics he ends up doing anyway. And not to mention, his pure heart is also what ends up redeeming Meg, as only such a person could show somebody so embittered that there were still good people in the world. basically, the movie Hercules is honestly a really good example of character writing all around. Hades just overshadowed the other characters to such a degree that most people don't notice. Now, like I said before, Disney has never been any stranger to having their villains steal the spotlight from the heroes, as bad guys used to be a specialty of theirs. But Hades in particular was able to completely show up everybody else in Hercules, not only by being very well written as a villain, but also because he is easily the most entertaining character in it. Because as I also just got through saying, all of the characters are well written, but in the fun department, Hades easily takes the cake, as usually the heroes of any given Disney film are fun to a degree, but because Hercules and the other characters' journeys are played so seriously compared to Hades' very funny shenanigans, he's the one that audiences tend to remember. Which is by no means a bad thing, as he's still presented as evil enough that nobody would earnestly try to argue that he deserved to win, even if he's so enjoyable that many probably end up rooting for him all the same. He's honestly a perfect Disney villain, to the point that the only bad thing that can be said about him is that Disney wasn't able to make more villains like him in the years that followed Hercules' release. Okay, I think that's everything I had to say on that. So now why don't you tell me? Do you believe that Hades is easily the best character in Disney's Hercules for any or all of the reasons I just went over? Or do you believe that he's overrated and that the other characters are done better? Please feel free to let me know in the comments below. Because as I always stress in these videos, you don't have to agree with anything I said here just because you watched it. You can feel about Hades and the movie Hercules however you'd like, and if you think I had it all wrong, that is totally okay. And thank you all for watching. I very appreciate it. And I hope to see you all next time.